Hello everybody and welcome to episode 2 of The Sulky Show. Now this week I am not joined by my co-host Darren Owen because he is far too busy with his actual day job. I understand he's been in Musselburgh today. So I am joined by this week Tier Prince's racing manager Eric Witherspoon. So welcome Eric.
Thank you very much, Eric. Delighted to join you.
Right, and the reason we've got you on tonight specifically is although we're going through the card for York tomorrow, just to give a quick preview, we've also got Tier Prince's opening meeting on Tuesday the 14th of July, which is featuring the North Wales Horse Owners Association 2, 3 and 4-year-old races. So we've got a kind of a double whammy tonight on the Sulky Show. We've got the York preview for tomorrow, which is 9 races, a mixed card as well, and then we've got the stakes races on Tuesday to run through as well. So Eric, obviously you'll be in a position to kind of talk us through those in a bit more detail. But before we get to Tier Prince, we will start on with the York card. I understand you've had a chance to look through it as well, Eric. So 9 races at York tomorrow. First race tomorrow.
Yeah, good entry again.
Yeah, definitely.
Good entry again.
Definitely. Well supported by trainers from all over the country. I think we've got some Scottish runners, English and Welsh. Obviously, it's maidens, novices, handicap races and a couple of trots. We'll start with race 1, which is a maiden pace, 10 runners. You've had a look through the card, Eric. What do you fancy here in the first?
Yeah, I've had a quick look through. If I'm looking to my left now, it's because they're on the screen there. So I'm just having a look through. Colford Wiggle, haven't seen a great deal of it, but I think he's 5 now. It's drawn 1 there. I would imagine Joseph will try and lead out with it. I don't know whether you've seen anything of Get Me Out of Here, Sarah, of 8th and weights in the qualifying days at York.
Just a qualifier or 2, I think, in the weeks leading up to last week.
Yeah, haven't seen much of that. One I did see in a qualifier on the stream at York was Artifection of Rockers. Won a qualifier very easily, looked really nice. I think it went 2-2, 4 years old. Type of horse Rocker would do well with, I would imagine. I remember him racing the mother, Southside Affection, and I also remember Artifacts as well being a good mare. So it's bred to win, looked really nice. And I remember putting him in up, but when I seen it qualify, no disrespect to any others, but I don't see any reason to deviate from that really, based on what I saw in it when I saw it qualify in that first meeting. So I would fancy Artifection there.
You're strongly going with Artifection there as well. As you mentioned, Southside Affection was a multiple race winner. John O'Neill there from Scotland with Artifection. There's a couple of others in the race that I've marked on the card as well. Just horses that I saw racing last week at York. Conor McGregor, he was just outside the first 3 last week at York, but he was second on sale day last October. And I think the horse is knocking on the door when it comes to these maiden races. And also Dreamfair Duke, a Scottish horse. He was second last week, finished strong. A horse that had a bit of trouble at the back end at Corbywood last year, wouldn't settle at the start of races. And I did mention last week with Darren that I thought the horse would actually enjoy the bigger track at York after having run quite well in a qualifier. I was proven right last week because he was second, and I think Dreamfair Duke, although he has a bad draw, these are the problems. The Conor McGregors and the Dreamfair Dukes of the race, the draw is against them. So we'll wait and see what happens. But there's a couple in the race. You've mentioned Artifection. For me, Conor McGregor and Dreamfair Duke are in with a chance. Colford Wiggle has the plum draw. It's quite a competitive race as I see it. And I don't think whoever wins the race, I don't think it's going to be a great surprise to me because I've got a short list that probably isn't that short. So moving on to race 2, we've got a maiden and novice combined event. Again, 10 horses face the starter. What's your pick here?
A few unknown quantities in here. I know West End Illusion is owned by Johnny Ball, and I know it's by foreclosure. He bought it off Graham Smith. I think it was born in July. It was a late foal, and so Mick just tricked about with it last year. They raced it right at the last back end of the season here, and he came to watch it. So Johnny Ball wouldn't keep it if he didn't think it was any good, to be quite honest with you. Obviously, some good horses over the years, drawn 3. Whether or not I'd be ready to win tomorrow, I think I would say that any market moves would be indicative. Definitely. I think there was an on-course gamble last week for Oakwood Bandit, so I was told. Obviously did a very fast opening quarter. probably just didn't quite get home after that. Blew up a little bit. Undoubtedly, he'll strip fitter for the win. Action Jackson, very impressive, wasn't he? He's won quite cosily in the end, actually. And he's one I didn't fancy, to be honest with you, before the race. I thought Danny Lee Price, C-class driver, gave him a great drive, to be fair to him.
Yeah.
He's got it to do again there off the back line, but I'd be split between Bandit and Action Jackson. If you push me and I had to have a bet, I would say Bandit might get it right this week and come on for his run last week.
Okay, so you're opting with Rich Casebraith there, and for Bandit. Like you say, you mentioned Action Jackson. For me, the horse was ultra consistent in qualifiers coming into the race last week. And I think the time he went last week was in line with those times in the qualifiers. It's around about a 2-2 performer. A 2-2 in this race might be enough to win it. The problem is now we're talking about draw 9. You're 4 out on the second line. There's a lot of traffic to pass. With an inexperienced driver like Danny Price, he is a C-class driver. He hasn't had that many races. You wouldn't expect him perhaps to be able to make the kind of quick decisions that some more experienced drivers would. But last week he did impress me. His drive last week, he was forced to make a decision. And potentially that was a race-winning decision. Although Action Jackson finished very strongly and was a comfortable winner, had Danny not made that decision when he did, things might not have panned out for him as well as they did. So I was impressed with the kind of the driving brain that he had during the race. So for me, Action Jackson, I think, even with those horses in front of him, for me, consistent 2-2 performer should, in theory here, be close at the finish. You've mentioned West End Illusion, they're coming out of the qualifiers. Y Ellis is another horse that's been cited in the qualifiers. Possibly, with Willie Greenhorn taking the drive there and Rocker's taking the drive on Frisco Touch and Go, that may be a sign as to where Rocker thinks his best chance is coming from, but equally it could be that is just a decision of the owners. We'll have to wait and see on that. Yeah. I personally, you mentioned Action Jackson and Oakwood Bandit. You've gone Oakwood Bandit. I'm going to take Action Jackson in this one. I think 2 out of 2 for the season is my prediction there.
Yeah, it could be a decent race start.
Yes, definitely. Race 3. So this is the first of 3 trots on the card. The pre-Athos. 8 trotters here face the starter. We're up to 1.5 miles this week. Last week the 2 trots were 1.25 miles. We are up to 1.5 miles.
Yeah.
That potentially in itself now is going to bring in a different dimension, these different distances. But based on some of these horses that you may have seen last week in the qualifiers, who do you fancy here in the third race?
I know that Elkie Depew for the Mathers was well fancied last week. Was touched off, but probably had every chance. Might be suited by going a bit further. Stables horses do usually come on for a run as well. Ugolin Viking, there. I haven't seen a lot of him, but he won Round Tier Prince in I think his first start. So if it wasn't his first start, it was his second start. So he's a classy individual. He came here and he won. He's got a nice draw. He'll be there or thereabouts, I would have thought. I know they think a lot of Dream Vacation on the second line, and I think that I was reading something about his form today that he's broke 8 times out of 10, and the 2 times he hasn't broke, he's won. So if he stayed down, he could spring a surprise. But looking at that there, Phil O'Neill drawn 2, they're a good stable with the trotters. I would probably go with Golden Viking.
That's, do you know what, when I look through this race, I feel it's quite a wide open race because you've got quite a few horses in this race that are actually stepping up out of the qualifiers. They've only been cited in qualifiers. They didn't race last week and they haven't raced here before. So these are kind of unknown quantities. And of the ones that are stepping up out of these qualifiers, Bianca de Bruet, for example, and Belly Finale, they've shown progress through the qualifiers. And Belly Finale, when driven by Joe Quinn in the qualifiers, she was putting in a couple of skips, but Joe spoke very, very highly of her after those workout races. With Ryan Asquith driving her in a qualifier, she did trot I think it was 1.25 miles, possibly it was a mile the one week they did it, but she put in a clean workout. Ryan Asquith then takes the drive here. So, for a young driver that is stepping into his first couple of races, Ryan Asquith had guided her quite nicely through a qualifier. And with a decent draw, if he drives with a cool head, he may be there in the finish. You go to Viking, like you say, I don't think you can ever discredit Phil O'Neill with a trotter. So, you know, he could turn up tomorrow and could be a resounding winner in what looks to be quite a competitive race. And Elka Depoy, you know, did nothing wrong last week, nothing wrong at all. Beaten in the second, looked a very straightforward horse. I have to say that Peter Mather, with all of the trotters that he's got, they're all very straightforward. You know, they're straight and you know, there's no, you don't have to worry so much about the braking element with them, which obviously as a punter is always
sensible.
Again, you've mentioned two horses, and you kind of edged with Phil O'Neill. You kind of had the two that I really fancied in the race, so I think I'm going to go split the other way, and I will take Elka Depoy with Peter Mather in that one. We'll wait and see. Right. Could be one of the others for all we know.
Could be one of the others. Yeah.
Race 4 is an open pace. 8 runners in this race. I know I've got my eye on a couple in this, but what about you?
Yeah, I don't know anything about Cavendish. I was reading about its form today. Last won 3 seasons ago, 2017, clocked 2:104 there. Don't know enough about that. Christy Camden last week popped up in different ownership and got a win. Pleased for that, because obviously coming back from an injury. Colford Jiggle can be a bit in and out. Ladyford Jim. I mean, Talavari Motivator, it wasn't... I didn't watch the qualifiers last week, but I did get the results. And I think that did a reasonable clock. It's got the 5 draw to overcome. Don't know how Meadowbranch Titus is going. You probably know more about that. Darcy Camden's, it's not a bad sort, really. Been 2 round tier prints. But I know they think a lot. I don't know whether Gregor still owns Frankie B. Whether it's still in Scottish ownership.
Campbell's.
Right, okay, fine. But I know they think a lot of that. And he finished second here last year, when I say here, at Tier Prince, to Roller Coaster. Did a clock of 2:1.2. I think he's probably the class horse in the race. But it does look a bit open. It looks, you could make a case for a few in there.
Yeah.
But I think that Frankie B will be ready, he'll be fit, and I think if I was having a bet, I would probably, even with the 8 draw or 3 on the second line, I would probably hedge with Frankie B.
I mean, yeah, it's fair enough to mention Frankie B. Frankie B is a horse with bags of ability. For me, I had it narrowed down to a couple. Frankie B was one of them. Meadowbranch Titus was second last week, behind Beaten to the Limit, I think it was, and was a real kind of surprise for me. I haven't seen the horse racing before because it's come from Ireland. Bobby Rowan has a tendency now in the last couple of seasons. He's one of these owners from Scotland who will go to Portmarnock. You know, he will look to Portmarnock for horses to buy to bring to the UK because the pacing kind of seen in Ireland has dropped, and there's maybe not the races for them. And you can step back from Portmarnock to places like Corbywood and be super competitive. And Meadowbranch Titus for me, based on last week, for me, I thought with, you know, if Corbywood, you know, gets racing, Meadowbranch Titus for me is a horse that could win multiple races at Corbywood this season and really enjoy that. The horse ran very well last week, in my opinion, did nothing wrong, was just kind of beaten in the last maybe, you know, 50 yards, something like that, to the line. So for me, Meadowbranch Titus is possibly the one to beat. I think Frankie B is of the same class as Meadowbranch Titus. I think the two of them could be the kind of main protagonists towards the finish. I've got a personal soft spot for Colford Jiggle. I really like Colford Jiggle. He's got this attitude where he just puts his head down, his ears back, and he really tries the full way around. But he is capable of putting in a misstep at the start and blowing his chances come the finish. You know, if he's to get away at the start, Colford Jiggle could be in the mix as well. Christy Camden, like you say, won last week, which for me was, you know, I did say, and I was commented on at York a couple of times, I'd been a little hard on Christy Camden in the preview on the Sulky show on a Friday night. It wasn't, when I said that I was disappointed in the horse, I'd met that horse as a 2-year-old and I really liked him, and I'd expected more from him, and also the other 2-year-old that Rock and Lex had that year as well, Horatio Camden. I'd had a lot of kind of hopes for them. Christy more so perhaps in the stakes races, and he hadn't quite done what I'd anticipated him doing. Then he had the injury, he's come back, and I did say perhaps this is the time for him to kind of show what he's made of. And for me, you know, he only did what he had to do last Saturday, and that was evident in the time, and it was evident in the way that Michael Imani drove him. Willie Greenhorn had driven in a qualifier, and you know, he's back on him for tomorrow. So Christy Camden, you know, whatever race the time goes, Christy Camden will probably be in the mix. But if you really push me on this, I would take Meadowbranch Titus, I think, to beat Frankie B.
Yeah.
Christy Camden.
Two very well bred horses, aren't they?
Yes, it's a very competitive race, you know. And Talavari Motivator, you gave a mention. Talavari Motivator really came into his own with Michael training last year, and you know went all right in a qualifier last week as well. So Talavari Motivator could be a horse that I wouldn't be surprised if he was involved in the shake-up at the finish.
He's going to be in the shake-up, yeah.
Definitely. Right, C-Class race 5 C-Class race. One of my favourite types of conditioned races, C-Class races. Here we go. So these are the drivers that haven't had more than 7 wins, I think, in their driving careers. So generally, historically, these are younger drivers, but we do have a seasoned campaigner in Mick Grellis driving Cashel. So what's your fancy here with the C-Class drivers?
Looking at the front line of horses, Cash Hall stands out to me there as being, it's got the wide draw, but I think if check the BHRC results, and I think he clocked 2-1 and a piece last week. Sarah, does that sound right to you?
Possibly. I convincingly say yes to a lot of things, and they turn out to be wrong. So don't quote.
I was looking at it earlier, and I think he'd gone 2-1 and some fractions. So looking at that, I mean, it depends how his driver manages him from the 5 draw there. But he certainly could feature. Obviously, Next Generation, great campaigner. 14 now, I think you said earlier on, yeah. Camden Coley, Valentine Camden, Danny Lee Price ran a good race last week. Joby Randall had a winner last week as well, didn't he, on his trotter? Yeah. He's a Ladyford Express. But the 2 that probably stand out to me in there would be Cash All off the front line, but then off the back line, I mean, Bobby Camden is a multiple race winner. Admittedly, he wins more races on grass, but he's still got a 2-1 clock. And I think young Mr. Laidler would fancy himself to win on that, probably. So I would go with Bobby Camden, probably.
Okay. I mean, you're talking about this in front line and second line, and you're not the only person I could talk about this. As I'm looking at the start sheet, and as I've understood it, it is with trails, but you're not the first person to say front line, second line, and Bobby Camden is getting a kind of head start that maybe he's not entitled to really based on his handicap grade. I've read it as trails, in which case it's a completely different complexion of a race.
It would be, yeah.
Bobby Camden in 2 lines, Bobby Camden is drawn 10, which is, it is an awful draw to have. But Bobby Camden racing on a trail is trailing 60 yards, and that is far worse. So
that's a lot different now, actually, Sarah. Yes, so I'm just looking at the BHRC website now.
It does massively.
It's got him trailing 60. Yeah. If he was on that basis trailing 60, I would fancy Cash Jaw.
It's a far bigger ask. Bobby Camden for me is the class horse in the race, but a 60-yard trail. If you're talking about horses on the front, the gate horses being capable of going, let's say 2-1, 2-2, 2-3. It's possibly too much for Bobby Camden to do off 60 yards. And if that does have to be the case as what's printed in the start sheet, for me, I would need to look, I think, to the gate horses, because they are going to get that advantage. They don't necessarily need to worry about the horses behind them. On that basis, for me, I've gone for Valentine Camden here. He has got good early toe. He will get away. If Danny Price chooses to let the horse go early as well, he has the ability and the speed to get away and get a good first quarter in and perhaps settle it in front. It becomes a catch-up then. It does, and these races with the trails will depend also on how the drivers up front dictate the race, because if they put a lot of early speed in, it will stretch them even more. Where if somebody kind of slows, if they go through the half quite slowly, you are giving those back horses that time to concertina in and kind of catch up with them. And of the horses that are trailing, you are looking at the Bobby Camdens. Camden Rocco, he's got a 20-yard trail. He isn't the kind of horse that ever sets the track alight, but he's super, super consistent. There's no drama with Camden Rocco at all. Last week, I spoke to Connections, and they weren't very hopeful of anything other than kind of finishing last, which I thought was a little hard on Rocco. And he actually finished on very strong to finish, very, very close fourth. It was a photo finish for third with him. And having been caught behind horses that were sort of dead wood in the latter stages of the race. Had he been able to get an open door slightly earlier, I believe would have run on into third quite comfortably.
Right.
The front horses, I think I'm looking at Valentine Cameron. I think Danny Price could be on for a double tomorrow.
Could be, yeah. You're backing him for a double, yeah.
It's a bold move. It's a bold move for me to back a C-class driver for a double, but it happened at Longno once with George Carson 2 years ago. He drove a double in the C-class. He actually doubled his lifetime driving in one day, so it can be done. It can be done.
Of course it can. Yeah. And to be fair to Danny, I think he passed his test here last year, I think, with the Meadowbrand course. So I was impressed with him last week. I won't say too much more than that because I don't want to put too much pressure on him. But I thought he drove well last week.
If he watches this, he's either going to crumble under the pressure, or it's going to give him that confidence in these races to kind of do the things that need to be done to win. But good luck to all the C-class drivers, though. It's great to get the slightly more inexperienced drivers, young and old. Because Mick Brenes is no spring chicken, but it's nice to see those guys back out and racing. Race 6, we're on to the second trot of the day. Another 8 horses, another 1.5 mile event. They're all 1.5 mile events tomorrow for the trots. What do you fancy here?
When I first looked at it, I looked at Unfiance. Now I remember John Foy importing this horse, and he was quite bullish about it. Really liked it, and just never happened. I remember him being disappointed a couple of times after he raced. From memory, I might be wrong, but I think he had a problem with tying up. But then obviously John doesn't sit on him if you're not doing the business, and he moved him on. He's in Danielle Geraldi's ownership now, training him, obviously Matty Quinn's connections. So I think that'll be somewhere along. They've booked Rocker, drawn 3. That'll be Chansey. Vero de Region very rarely runs a bad race. Bocage de Fournette's won around York before. Falcon de Merrill won at Tier Prince, I think, last time out. I think it won the lowest grade final that they had last year, maybe. I know that he's been with Athletes for certainly a couple of seasons now. I think they've managed him carefully. He'll be on the premises. And Emma Starr is another one, same owner and trainer as Unfiance. So I can see that over 1.5 miles. It's quite competitive, really. If you pushed me there now to pick a winner, and I was having a bet over the 1.5 miles on performances that I've seen, and I think Alan Aithenwaite's horses will be ready, I would go with Falcon de Melleray.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, like you've mentioned it, it's 1.5 miles. Emma Starr was a winner last week with Rocker driving. That was 1.25 miles. We are now stepping up to the 1.5 miles. Emma Starr was actually the challenging horse. Emma Starr was the horse that beat out the boy. So Emma Starr potentially, was the stronger finisher. Well, she was the stronger finisher of the two because she did just get to the line ahead of Elka Boy. So on that basis, perhaps 1.5 miles won't be too much of a difficulty or a step up for her. Different driver. We are moving now to John Innes, who is a C-class driver, hasn't driven a winner. So it depends. That we don't know how much difference that makes. You've got the distance factor is coming into it. You've also got the change of driver factor. Rocker being a very experienced driver with paces and trotters, and then John Innes, who, although working with his trotters and having done a lot of qualifiers in the last few weeks and workouts to do his driving tests, has that that lack of experience that may tell in a competitive race. Bank Edgy comes in as a horse that's not raced yet. Peter Mather, I have to give that a mention because Peter, as I said earlier, is great with these trotters, training and driving them. And Lee Ricks, Bocage de Fournette, I think is a horse that first time out could go very, very well here. So for me, it's one of many very wide open races here at York tomorrow. I was really pushed. I think I'm going to go with Lee Ricks. Bocage de Fournette I thought went nicely in a qualifier a couple of weeks ago, so I'm going to take Lee Ricks in this one and see how we get on. But anything can happen. 1.5 miles.
Okay. Yeah. It should be a good race.
So race 7, back to an open race here. 9 horses, 2 lines, 5 on the gate, 4 on the second line. Anything jumping out at you here?
when I looked at this, when I first looked at this last night, my instant reaction was that the two class horses in the race were JM's Macy's Hallstar, drawn 3, and former BHRC Futurity winner at Tier Prince, DK's Happy Forever. I mean, Madge's Lad, really dependable, 159 record. Colford Mystery, again, has been 159 round York. So then, you know, be looking at them two. Bribham's Magician's probably better on grass. But I don't know. You would probably know more about DK's Happy Forever than me, because I know that Buster and you are, you know, your friends. I know that you were delighted. I remember you being delighted the night you won the Futurity here. That to me is the type. Yeah, that to me is the type of horse that that the Laidlers. I mean, they do well with 90% of the horses that they have. That's why they're the champions. But 5-year-old, he's juvenile, and his 2-year-old, 3-year-old career behind him. He's still on a good mark. I think he's the type of horse that the Laidlers do improve. And I don't know whether you've seen him in qualifiers or anything like that. I haven't. But even from that 9 draw, he's one that would interest me tomorrow. I think he's the type of horse they could bring out and really, really improve. So it's a good race. It's competitive again. There's some good clocks in there. There's some sub 2-minute horses in there. But if I was pushed again, even though drawn 9, I don't think DK's Happy Forever would be out the first 2. So I'd go with that one.
I would be inclined to agree with you. DK's Happy Forever, having moved stable, this is a horse that's gone from an amateur stable to a professional stable. Buster Moncrief still owns the horse, having previously trained the horse the last couple of seasons. This is a step now, first start for a professional stable with the Laidlers. And the last time the DK's Happy Forever was trained by a professional trainer was when he won the 2-year-olds at Tier Prince and beat Meticulous. So it's horses like that that you can expect to see some sort of improvement with. It's no disrespect to an amateur trainer. It is just that stepping into that routine and that training method that those professional trainers have got. So DK's Happy Forever, I would anticipate to benefit from that. Coincidentally, another horse that stepped into a stable change there in professional hands is Immortal John with Stevie Lees. And interestingly, Stevie's got 2 horses in this race, Colford Mystery and Immortal John, and has chosen the drive on Immortal John. We're into the grades of horses here where these have got, these are horses with multiple lifetime wins. So they are good, good, they're not unknown quantities. They are good, solid handicap racehorses. So, Immortal John and DK's Happy Forever for me, although whilst having the worst draws in the race, me, I think are the 2 to really keep an eye on. You mentioned Madge's Lad, definitely a really consistent performer around about the 2-minute mark, which is, potentially the kind of speed this race is going to go. James Macy Hallstar is another. She hasn't actually won for a couple of seasons, but she's got the ability. So it's not a question of is she as good as she used to be. She has got the ability. She does have that benefit against Madge's Lad, Immortal John, DK's Happy Forever of being on the gate and potentially getting away. Getting a good start and getting away. ATM, she's raced most of her career at Corbywood. And after last week, I said last week that I thought the horses coming from Corbywood, even though at the start of the season, the horses coming from Corbywood to York perhaps were on the back foot. But Grant Cullen's horses, Meadowbranch Titus, Lions Nan Hall, they went very well. So there isn't perhaps isn't quite the difference at the start of the season. These horses are everybody still racing into that bit of race fitness. These Scottish horses travelling down to York perhaps aren't disadvantaged by not having a half-mile track to train on. And with Hamish Muirhead's training facilities, he's got a grass track, and it's a large grass track as well. So it's a track we race on at Hall Field. So he's perhaps not disadvantaged at all when he comes down to York. ATM could be a horse between ATM, James Macy Hallstar, put a bit of speed into the early part of the race. But I would still be looking at Immortal John and DK's Happy Forever at the finish. I think those 2 are the ones to keep an eye on.
Yeah, good race.
And the last of the trots, the penultimate race of the card, are the last of the 3 trots. These are what we would deem to be the kind of the highest level of the trotters that are racing on the card tomorrow. Very, very good race. Another 8, another 1.5 mile event. Where would you be leaning here?
It's top class, this, isn't it? It's what you call the gold race for the trotters. I did see Black Williams or in one of the qualifying meetings. I know you put a photograph up of him flying out the gate, drawn 5. He looked really nice. I mean, Carriers de Criers, I know they think a lot of him. Raced him at Tip Prince a few times last year. Vici de Moem, I know a fair bit about. He was disabled at the track for a time with Mark and Vicky Elvin. He's getting on a bit now. 11 years old, but he's a class individual. Amazing. Jason Alley, I mean, he pops up and wins intermittently. You know, Broadway de Bourg won last week with Joby on. But for me, the last 2 horses, Diamond de Godwin and Emirate Lillevant, they're those 2 are the bosses really. And you know, I'd pay just to go and watch them 2 race tomorrow. To be honest with you, when I pay to watch the stream, that's a race I'll be looking to watch keenly. I really like both of those trotters. I'm going to go with Diamond. But you could toss a coin basically, and I could make just as good a case for either of them. But just for the sake of choosing one of them, really, I'll go with Diamond. He's a really nice horse, and he's a good young driver, isn't he, John Henry Nicholson? So I think I'll go with him over 1.5 miles.
Yeah, well, that's fair enough. I mean, based on the most recent qualifier that Diamant de Gadrel went in, alongside stablemate Blasson, the 2 of them were very impressive in their qualifier. But it was a workout race. It was very, very easy for the both of them, effortless. As a result of that, I strongly fancied Blasson last week in the higher trot, and he was beaten by Broadway de Bourg. So Broadway de Bourg had really put in a massive performance last week to take that race, and to be honest, you know, was actually going again away from them. So in theory, could do that mile and a half no problem. Was fit, was ultra consistent and straightforward throughout the full 1.25 miles. Reen Wilson, his horses were fit last week. It was evident, not just in Broadway de Bourg. He also now had Black Williams in the race as well. And Black Williams, as you mentioned there, that gate speed that he showed when drawn 5 in a qualifier, for me, was absolutely alarming. And knowing that Broadway de Bourg is fit, I believe Black Williams to be, fit as well. I'd be interested to see. For me, I think Reen Wilson has got a really strong chance here with either of the horses that he's got in the race. Obviously, he's taken the drive on Black Williams, and Joby's taken the drive on Broadway de Bourg because he's the owner of the horse as well. Then you throw into the mix, you mentioned Diamant de Gadrel. Emirate Lillevant made a mistake last week under pressure in the final kind of 1/8 of a mile, went off his legs a few strides. And that might have been because there was that pace in the race and it wasn't perhaps the distance that he liked. You know, it has been discussed at quite a lot of length really that Emirate Lillevant, he likes the kind of 1.5 mile up to 2 mile races. The further he goes, the better he goes. And perhaps if there isn't that speed in the race in the earlier part, or even at the finish, they're not turning it into a sprint finish because they've had to go that longer distance. Emirate Lillevant could really come into his own there. For me, it's a massively wide open trot. I've got 4 horses there that I wouldn't be surprised if any of them won. Knowing my luck, it would be one of the ones I haven't mentioned that actually comes out.
No, it's a good race. And I think you mentioned Broadway de Bourg there. I think that's another one that John Foy brought into the country. Or certainly, I'm sure it's been in his ownership. And, the guy lives and breathes trotters. So when he brings them in, they're decent. Obviously, he sells them on quite a bit. But, he's a nice individual.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to... I think if you were going to really, really push me on a horse in this race, I would take... This is a hard one. I would take Broadway de Bourg based on last week and the strength in which he finished. I think he could, another 1/4 mile. I don't think would have been a bother to him last week. But like I say, I'm surprised if.
I'll stick with Godrell. There we go.
Yeah, I mean, I'll have Savannah Nicholson on now later. When she watches this and says to me, "How could you not pick my horse? Why are you showing no loyalty to me?" And Savannah, I love Diamant de Gadrel. I really do.
I've picked it. So.
But there we go. I've got to differ from Eric to make it, interesting. We can't just pick the same horses every race. And then we are on to what I deem to be the feature pacing race. The Open, race 9, 10 horses. Yep. What a field of horses this is to look at.
Yes. Yeah. There's a few you could make a case for in there. I'll whiz through. I mean, I love Plan B. Tip Prince Specialist. I know he's a bit of a character. He's got a 58.56 record around York. He's a really, really good hard track horse. He's drawn 1 on the second line, so he could get quite a nice trip round there. Mikey Camden, nice to see him back in action. Obviously, you know, he's got a 56 record round Tier Prince, which makes him an out-and-out proper free-for-aller, coming back from injury. His race was one of the races that I missed last week, so I don't know how he ran, but he's obviously a class individual and will come on for his run last week. But for me, the bottom horse, Rocking Mambo, I fancied him last week in that field, even from his draw. He obviously, I don't think he didn't finish in the first 3, did he? I was surprised to see when I checked the result that he hadn't finished in the first 3. But then I read something afterwards, or saw something. I saw something in the roundup afterwards where Mark and Jen said that he was a little bit behind in his work because of what happened with COVID-19, and that he would come on for the run. If he has come on for the run now and Strip's a bit fitter, even from that draw, I would expect to see him make a move in the back straight, either in the first time round or the second time round, and hit the front. I think he's good enough to do it. So for me, I would go with Rocking Mambo. I would go with Rocking Mambo. But it's a big ass drawn 10 round York, and there's some good horses in the race.
No, I agree with you. It was Mark and Jenny had said to me that Rocky hadn't had his perhaps quite the work that was required to come into the stand.
That's probably where I saw it then when I watched your roundup. That's probably where I saw it, yeah.
So for that, on that basis alone, last week we'll have brought him on because it was a race that went 59s. You know, that in itself is going to bring Rocky Mambo on. Having watched the replay on review, it looked like when Mark did make his move down the back straight on the second lap, it looked like there was a potential hookup of wheels, or an anticipated hookup of wheels, because the horse kind of was going forward with you know, great speed, and then almost kind of hit the brick wall a little bit, but then came again. But at that point, you know, the horses were trying to get 4 and 5 wide around the bend. They were trying to kind of bunch up to try and make challenges, and perhaps that fitness came into question there slightly. But definitely, as far as I'm concerned, I believe that run will bring Rocky Mambo on. He's going to be, you know, hit by these bad draws week in, week out at Yorkshire races here, in these handicap races, because he is a free-for-all quality horse, and he's not the only one. Mike Camden's the same, Rob Hall's the same. You know, they will get hit with these poor draws, although they're not trailing, so that in itself is a kind of silver lining for connections there. Of the front horses, GD's Hazard actually posted a lifetime best last week in defeat when finishing 4th. That's his second sub-2-minute performance in his career. He's a horse that I believe gets better with age. Jerry and Dave, who own him, are fantastic people. They're fantastic people within the sport itself. You know, the fact that you can take enjoyment from a horse being the first horse you've ever owned to go sub 2 minutes, but not actually win the race. That in itself is nice. I'm still waiting on my first sub 2 minute performer, and I could be waiting a long while yet. But GD's Hazard for me, drawn 2. It's not you know, unexpected as far as I'm concerned for Andrew to try and lead out here. I don't know where the gate speed, if there's much gate speed in Living Star. Missed last season due to an injury sustained in the field. So Living Star, if he wants to turn it into a bit of a speed duel, I don't think he can win that speed duel. I think GD's Hazard has got the gate speed to get away drawn 2 and be in front before the quarter. Of the others on the gate that may try and challenge, Billy Wilk may go forward as well. Air Empress, she's absolutely, you know, quality mare, but she's hung out to dry there, drawn 5. The gate, where the gate goes away at York this week is going to be different, so it will slightly benefit those wide horses. They're not going to be perhaps going into that first bend quite at as much speed as they would usually, because you know, they've had the chance to try and make a decision on where their position is going to be before they get to the bend. But ultimately for Air Empress, I think, you know, barring a miracle, she will find herself parked quite early, because it's difficult for 10 horses getting on the rail.
She's going to get a tough trip, isn't she? She's going to get a tough trip.
But having said that, I mean, she went particularly well in the qualifier a couple of weeks ago. There was monsoon conditions, and it wasn't, I think, perhaps on the day, Connections had kind of been hoping to put in a sub 2 minute workout. The rain came twice, and she was in the last qualifier, by which point the track was about 5 or 6 seconds off. It still went very, very well. But for me, you know, you can't discredit horses. You mentioned Plan B, Teddy Camden as well, who was a winner at Wolverhampton last year. For me, I'm looking on the gate Geely's Hazard to lead out. I think if he gets away, and he's clearly, in fine fettle based on his run last week as well. I think Geely's Hazard's in with a massive shot of winning this. Rocky Mamba will come on. I don't know whether he's going to come on enough to challenge Harry. I'm sticking with fan favourite Geely's Hazard, Harry, and Jerry and Dave for this one. So you take a back marker and I'll take a front line.
There we go. See how we go.
There we go, and that rounds up York. Now, before we started this, Eric and me had a bit of a chat before we started the show, and I said to him, "Well, we'll just run through York really quickly because we've got tier prints to get through, and people don't want to sit and listen to us talking all night. But do you know what? Tough, because if you sit down and watch this now, you are having to sit all night and watch us talking."